A lot of eyes on the Fed this morning. In just a few hours, the Open Market Committee will announce its latest moves on interest rates. And Yahoo Finance's Brian Cheung is in our D.C. bureau with a preview. So, Brian, a lot of conflicting signals and maybe, I don't know, a little wishful thinking from some that we could actually see a rate cut. But this market's not pricing that in, right?
No, not at all. I was just looking at the Fed funds futures market, and only a 2.5% chance that the Fed does indeed, cut rates by 25 basis points. The expectation is that they will hold rates at the current level of 2.25 to 2.5%. But in view is going to be any sort of changes to the FOMC statement. Again, this May meeting will not include any sort of dot plot projections or summary of economic projections. So it'll be the press release that's kind of in view in terms of the language that they use. Keep in mind that in the March meeting 6 weeks ago, the Fed said that the growth of economic activity has slowed from its solid rate in the fourth quarter. Obviously, we saw a very impressive GDP read last Friday. That was 3.2% for the first quarter. So interesting to see how Powell perhaps changes his tone in terms of the way that the economy has grown in the last 6 weeks. Again, Powell will have a press conference at the end of this meeting. That will begin at 2:30, and the statement will come out at 2 p.m. We'll have coverage for that right here on Yahoo Finance.
You think we're going to hear that word patience come up again and again? You know, Jay Powell keeps saying that the Fed is going to be patient when it comes to inflation.
Absolutely. That, in addition to the data dependency that the Fed has basically said it needs to rely on ever since it turned dovish at the beginning of this year. A looming question is how much pressure Powell faces in terms of the projected outlook for the rest of this year, in terms of where the rates might go, especially as we hear Donald Trump, for example, on Twitter saying that he would prefer a 1%, a 100 basis point rate cut. Probably some questions to be expected in this press conference about whether or not the Fed does face any sort of political pressure. Powell most likely to push back and insist, as he has for the last few months, that the Fed does remain completely independent and makes its decisions entirely based on what the data says.